So, first of all, we'll do the introduction in just 1 minute, and after we'll do an introduction, we'll give you a few minutes to watch the trailer if you haven't seen it already. So I'm going to drop the trailer in the chat. And in the meantime, please feel free to introduce yourselves, like let us know where you're coming from, what you're looking to get out of the event. Feel free throughout the conversation to drop the links to your LinkedIn on your website and just let us know what you're working on. Every time we host the event, we just really love to hear about, you know, where the audience is coming from. So keep us posted. And with that, I just like to introduce myself. My name is Justina Kedra, and I am part of the Impact Entrepreneurship Initiative team here at the New School. And my main responsibility is I help to bring mentors into the classroom, but also I host a podcast. And I wanted to introduce Jen Vandermeer and Neda Martinez, who are the co-directors of the program. And they're fantastic, and they'll tell you a little bit about themselves and about the program, and they'll also introduce Allison. So go ahead.
Hey, Justina, thank you so much. I'm Neda Martinez, and I am the director of the Media Management Graduate Program in the School of Media Studies and co-director with the fabulous Jen Vandermeer of the university-wide Impact Entrepreneurship Initiative. And so we're really excited about this collab because we feel that the common denominator of tonight's program is this theme of trust building, like moving away from the transactional. And I would like Jen to jump in and talk a little bit about the initiative, and then maybe I'll introduce Beth Levison and Alice Quinlan, our guests today.
Yeah, so thank you so much. I'm Jen Vandermeer. I teach in the Parsons School of Design Strategies, and I'm so happy to be partnered with Neda on this initiative for a number of years now. And I'm seeing some folks on this amazing event tonight who are alums and current students and people from all over the world. So we're very excited to have this conversation. And indeed, it seems that every conversation we're having about our initiative, which is very much like welcoming students to the New School who see entrepreneurship as a constructive force to address some of the grand challenges we see in the world. So not just in, using and leveraging media for that, but also, in healthcare, in technology, and so many other vectors of life. So trust is the thing that we can't seem to ever want to break. And so I think that's where we are as a society. So we're just really curious to dive deep on that topic tonight. I'm looking forward to it. Neda, will you introduce our?
Yeah, so Beth is also an entrepreneur. She has her own practice. Hazel Pictures is the company under which she does this fabulous work. She's an award-winning producer-director. She executive produced Grand Theft Helmed that premiered at South by, Photographic Memory at True False, The Martha Mitchell Effect, which premiered at Sundance. And today, Justina is launching into the chat the trailer for Storm Lake, which she produced with Jerry Risius, and it aired on PBS, an independent lens series, and it's still available there if you're a PBS member and also on other platforms. She is, like I said, the founder of Hazel Pictures and the co-founder of the Documentary Producers Alliance, and also teaches at Sarah Lawrence and is a member of the Academy. Alice Quinlan is an impact and engagement producer with more than 10 years of experience using storytelling to drive social change. She's a partner and co-founder of Red Owl, a company that I'm very fond of, and she leads campaigns and with responsive strategies and a creative eye for partnerships and community-based work. So I think, tell us a little bit, Beth, about your documentary practice, and I think trust is the first ingredient, right, in approaching subjects and stories.
Yeah, well, in the case of Storm Lake, I directed the film with Jerry and also produced that, and then I do have a producing practice. I like that you use that word because I say I have a producing practice, and I'm really interested in stories that are authentically told. And I'm also really interested in films that get seen and that go out into market or that reach audiences in really meaningful ways. A little bit about Storm Lake. I think that project is so rooted in trust. So Jerry Risius and I used to teach together at the School of Visual Arts. I was teaching producing, he was teaching cinematography. And Jerry is like a true news hound and Iowa born and bred. He grew up on a farm in Iowa and he reads the news like no one else that I know. And when the Pulitzers come out every year, he really pays attention to who gets them. And he noticed that the small newspaper in Northwest Iowa, the Storm Lake Times, with a readership of 3,000, it won a Pulitzer. And he was like, what? And so Jerry goes home to visit his family. They still live on or until very recently, actually, his parents lived on the farm. But at the time they were on the farm and he went home and then he did a little side trip to Storm Lake, Iowa and met Art. And Art is the editor of the Storm Lake Times. And Jerry had an idea and to make a film about this newspaper. He didn't really know what it might be, but also didn't really know how to get the film off the ground. And so we had a lot of conversations with Art and a lot of back and forth. And then we were able to raise some money to get that project started. But kind of going back to the question, I think what really mattered, I'll never forget that on our first shoot, when we were in Storm Lake, Dolores, Art's wife, said, "Oh, you're Iowan. We don't have to explain everything to you." And so many outsiders had come in and expressed interest in their work, and they really appreciated that, like, a fellow Iowan was one of the people at the helm. So anyway, I guess I would just say that is a project that for me has always been a touchstone in terms of how we started that project, how we produced that project, and even how we've continued to distribute and reach audiences with that project. And I do think that being that trust and localness, if that's a word, has been a real part of that. And I feel like there's a relationship between staying local and trust. And we tend to trust our neighbors maybe sometimes more than people far afield. And so anyway, that I could talk more about trust, but I guess I just want to say, like, I definitely feel like this project emerged from a commitment to that and a desire to have trust with the subjects and build trust through the process of its distribution.
That's beautiful. And so real quick before I move on to Alice, just for the folks in the audience that may not know, tell us why Art Cullen is such a trusted journalist, and maybe a little bit about the Pulitzer story.
Yeah, I think that, you know, and if you tell me when you want to go to the trailer because that sort of helps, but I think Art is such a trusted journalist because, well, maybe, I mean, look, he's divisive in his community, but people certainly know that he speaks the truth as he sees it, and he pursues the truth doggedly. And, you know, one thing that he also does is he really acknowledges when he or someone on his team make a mistake and is open to that direct engagement. So, but he's an incredible journalist. He writes, he's now a guest contributor to the New York Times, to the Washington Post, to the Guardian, and he won a Pulitzer. It's a super complicated story, but he and his son, the lead reporter, Tom, figured out that there was sort of state-sanctioned environmental degradation happening through big ag in Iowa. And they investigated it, and they wrote about it, and they risked their business for it. And they ended up with a Pulitzer. And it was really a story about how big ag was polluting local waterways and getting away with it scot-free. So it's kind of an easy distillation of it because it's actually super complicated, but yeah.
And worth looking up. And so I think, Justina, we made an executive decision not to show the trailer because on Zoom it gets choppy, but we're throwing it in the chat and we're going to email it to everybody with the recording and with your website and the PBS links as well.
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so then Alice, tell us about your practice at Red Owl and also about this evolution of connecting communities. I feel that there's been a real evolution from outreach to engagement, and then now this word impact, which I don't know, I'm falling out of love with again, but let's see.
It really goes in and out, doesn't it? I'm just so happy to be here to be able to revisit the journey of the Storm Lake campaign that is still continuing, which I think we can talk about later. But trust is the bread and butter. I mean, I call myself an impact producer because I'm not very creative in this way, and it's the one thing that maybe I've explained enough to my family that they remember what it means. But basically, I like to think about what we do as really connecting films with the folks who are working both on a community level, but also at a national level and a global level to, make the social change that we want to see in the world. And a lot of that means getting out of the way and listening and being, open to being surprised about how these films can be useful. And I think for me, it all starts with being really passionate about the film itself and kind of treating it, although with what we do, you do end up creating materials and resources and ways for people to, use the film and share ideas. It really is, what lives between the two walls of the beginning of the film and the end of the film that needs to be moving people and be a home base that we can, come back to as we're building partnerships and reaching out to people. Is the film good? Do people want to watch the film? Is it moving? Is it compelling? Is it specific? Is something that was really important. I think that, one of the reasons why the Storm Lake campaign kind of kept going, and there was kind of always this carrot at the end of the road where Beth and I are like, oh, we should do more of this. I guess there's this other thing happening that we want to be a part of. And I think it's because, the film is really specific and it's about the town of Storm Lake and it's about the Storm Lake Times and the town. But in that specificity, I think what we saw is when I would, reach out to a local paper in New York City or LA or, El Paso, Texas, like the resonance was, this is a really specific story about Storm Lake, but I can use it as a newspaper owner, as a publisher, or as a reporter or editor. I can use it to talk about the value that I bring to my community, which has just been really gratifying for years at this point to see those conversations happen.
And something that's universal, we attract such a creative student body, and I think something you just said landed and so universal. It's the specificity of a story is what really kind of elevates it and makes it so universal. Jen, do you want to jump in with the question?
Yeah, I mean, I instantly get into that, that impact word that Nita's feeling uncomfortable with right now, even though you're the co-director of the Impact Entrepreneurship Initiative. Yeah, so get with the
We need a
program.
rebrand. We'll talk about it next week. No.
Well, just that word. I know, Alice.
Impact
I
sounds
think
like
you embrace that word, so I'm curious how you think about it and
Yeah.
who it matters most to when you do this work.
I think, we do need a new term. And my old job, I was the director of community engagement and education at POV, which is wordier, but I definitely resonate more with this community engagement phrasing. I think impact is so broad. And I also think it's a big, like our industry of impact production, it's a huge umbrella and it encompasses a lot of stuff that really falls more under the PR and marketing side of things. And we love our collaborators in PR and we love our marketing pros that we work with. That's not really what I do. And what really, I feel so lucky, and it's my real benefit as a career to be able to walk into every conversation thinking, does this work for you? Is this actually something that is going to, be beneficial for your community? Does this film really resonate with you or not? And my goal is, as an impact producer, to be a trusted midwife between a film team and the community to say, I'm really recommending that you consider this because I can see how it might work for you. I'm also very open to hearing how it doesn't work. And we will shake hands and say, great. And we will, not push. That might not have answered your question.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I'm curious as well, because Nada has shared with me, I'm not in the film world. I'm in the investment impact world for tech, those horrible things. And so, impact means something really specific to funders, and we tend to dance a little too brightly when the sun is shining from them onto us to try to fit within their way of thinking, and particularly around the notion of the impact that we seek, to make sure it's aligned, that we're seeking aligned visions and values. And I wonder how much that plays into the funding process for films, if it matters in the same way. For Beth first.
Yeah, I can take that. So when we started the film, honestly, I read this, I've said it a gazillion times, but I read this so basically, Jerry approached me about doing this film. I kind of had second thoughts about it. I didn't feel hooked, I guess I would say. And then Art published this editorial in the New York Times. I think it was the summer of 2018, and it was called "In My Town, We Need Immigrants." And I read the editorial, and it made me cry. And I'd never heard a voice like this before. One thing about editorial writing, so much of it comes from the coast or the coasts, Washington, New York, Los Angeles. Here was this voice from Storm Lake, Iowa. And, it was the beginning of things being really ugly. I think during the Trump campaign, was it the Trump presidency? But anyway, the message really resonated for me, what he had to say. And so when we started making the film, I just thought and once I got to know Art, I never met anyone like Art before. He just seemed so singular. And I thought we could make a really great movie about him and his family. And that's what we were really interested in the beginning of the process. But then as we were also developing the story, we started learning that there was a real national, if not global, but let's just focus on national crisis facing local news, that local newspapers were dropping like flies. And so while we wanted to make a really good movie, we also just started to understand that there was relevancy and urgency around the film, and that maybe if we could get the film out there, we could have impact. I don't mind using the word impact, that we could raise awareness among viewers about the role that local news plays in communities. We could highlight the existential crisis facing local news. I think we felt really jazzed by that. So, with this movie, we basically got it made in 2.5 years and fully funded, and it was fast. And I guess I would say that's fast. And I think part of the reason it was fast is because it felt really relevant, urgent, and we were offering these early ideas about impact. Of course, we didn't. And then the story evolved. It became about much more than just Art and his family. It became a film about Art, his family, the newspaper, the community. It became much more layered. And then as our impact efforts started to take off and they were really successful, and we were showing impact and engagement, then we were able to raise even more money for an impact campaign that's going into its 4th year, which is a long impact campaign for a film. And for those who don't know what that means, it's like when you use a film to create change of some kind in people's hearts and people's minds. It could be legislatively. So there was a connection between being able to raise money and intended impact. And I guess I just want to say too, like we're in this moment in documentary film that's really tough. I don't consider myself a social impact documentary filmmaker. I just consider myself a documentary filmmaker. But you know, there's this, we're in this moment where there's less interest in films that deal with social impact themes, and thereby they're getting less support, and they're not getting distribution. And then I think the public really suffers. And I think there is an audience out there, even though the streamers are saying we just want celebrities, true crime, music docs, sports. Like I do think there's a place for these films, and people are looking to be not just distracted and entertained, which I like as much as anyone else, but they do want to like understand the world and one another better and differently.
Yeah, totally, and to connect. And so for the non-filmmakers in the crowd, right? Because historically, the journey is a film festival, then maybe we have a little theatrical or a big theatrical, then sometimes award campaigns, then sometimes not award campaigns. But what I love about this process is that you really are shaping your why, what drove you to make the film, and also then defining your own success by putting it into the hands of people and community and leaders and networks so that they can grapple with the material and have conversations and build social connections, since we know from all of the media and the news, right, that our community social ties have frayed. And so Alice, when you are, I guess, deploying your strategy, what are the key tenets of your strategy, and how do you approach a community that you've never approached before?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think one thing that comes up for me is this research piece of it, which I'm not issue agnostic. I have social issues that I really care about personally and things that I really like to be engaged with. And recently that's been a lot about democracy and trust, but also other issues. And I see it as kind of all being very, very intertwined. But going back to kind of what I do or we do as a team when we're starting out on an impact campaign is really looking at the research and connecting with advisors. And luckily Beth had started that work before I even started working on the film, connecting with the, people who really know what they're talking about and have a lot to say about how they think, films or a piece of media can be impactful in this particular field, industry, or whatever. And one of the things that came up early on was that, and this is, I think, so different now. At the time that we were starting to work on the impact campaign, most people didn't know that local news was in crisis. And that really shaped everything about how the film was rolled out and the importance of having a really trusted major broadcast partner like PBS who could make sure that it was available and we could have that big audience. But that's just so different now. And I do think that the film played a part in being a part of this swell of attention around the issue at that time. There was a lot of factors there at the time that also contributed to that. But just this, just that fact alone, and it was at the top of so many of our, proposals. People don't know this. People are very surprised. And we saw that bear out at so many of the screenings around the film where, and I'll get back to the second part of your question, which is really important, but I love this very specific story, which is that the film was screening. Was it in Vermont, Beth, where, there was this newspaper. It was the longest running, local newspaper in Vermont. And the editor had kind of continually communicated to his subscribers, like, the paper's in crisis. I need help. I can't do this. I need somebody to help me. I need volunteers. I need money. I need something, or this is going to all come to a close. And it was at a screening of the film. and him communicating that at a screening of the film where the community had come together. And everybody was like, wait, no, this can't happen. We're very surprised. Yeah, Beth.
Yeah, actually, that was the issue. He was proud. He was really proud. He had never told the community. And so we had this sold out screening, and it's Woodstock, Vermont. It was the oldest newspaper. It's an affluent community, and they had no idea. And it was sort of like his coming out that, yeah, like we have 3 months left to keep going. So sorry, Alice, keep going.
No, and maybe getting back to Nita, your question about, working with communities that you haven't worked with before. I mean, I think of just being a good person who's not forwarding your needs first on a call. Like I just think of so much, we do so much via Zoom and it's so different. And so I just think of like the practice of a good Zoom call, which is introducing yourself, talking about the project, creating space for another person to introduce themselves, and really asking genuinely, like, what do you do? And what are your priorities right now? Before even getting into like, well, here's everything that we can offer you. Really like listening to what the need is. And sometimes, this particular film that I might be interested in sharing is actually not the one that I think would be the best for a current situation or a need. And then that's the great thing about this is a bit of a sidebar, but the independent filmmaking community, which is so collaborative, I can always say, oh, well, here's a film I'm not working on, but actually you should really talk to so-and-so. So.
And one thing that I wanted to add is when we, so in independent film, you think about your premiere, where are you going to premiere the film at a film festival? We knew we were going to public television, but we ended up getting invited to premiere at the Full Frame Documentary Film Festival in Durham, North Carolina. And it was kind of amazing because actually our advisor, this woman named Penny Muse Abernathy, she was a professor at UNC at the time, so right there. And actually, I just want to say that before this web call, I was on a webinar. She's being honored because now she's been at Northwestern, and she's retiring, basically. She's like the US expert on local news. And so there was a celebration of her and her work, and I just listened to that before this. But anyway, one thing that was really cool was that Alice, like, we came up with this idea, like a lot of films, like you have your festival run, and then you have like an impact run, and then you have a television broadcast. And we decided, what if we made every screening local and meaningful and impactful? And so from our premiere, with our premiere, we actually engaged a local newspaper or local newspapers in conversation about the threats they're facing, and ways that maybe they could secure help from their community, and use our screening as a way to raise awareness of their struggles in the community. And so we from our very first, and then we went to another film festival, and then we partnered with the local newspaper, and we had the local editor moderate our Q&A, and we folded in their struggles into that Q&A. And we had this festival run of, I don't know, 40 or 50 festivals. And we just said, we're going to use every one and make it an impact screening. And then what happened was, like, we could seed like the ecosystem with this idea, and it just kind of continued to continue the metaphor, like blossom, and we continued to have all these opportunities, and we created others. But for me, I'll say, as a filmmaker, I never intended to make an impact film, but it was sort of the right film at the right time. And so we decided to make every screening count from an impact perspective. And it was just really exciting because it allowed us to audience build. It allowed us to start local conversations about local news through this film. It just allowed for this whole ripple effect that felt meaningful, and then in turn informed us about the crisis facing local news from Maine to Texas. So anyway, we just had a kind of, and it's informed my work ever since, that festival premieres and festival runs don't just have to be about festivals. They can be about continuing to have a discussion about the themes of the film with audiences toward impact or kind of toward other goals.
And that's so beautiful because you're obviously celebrating your achievement, but you're taking the space, as they say, because you've earned it, but you're making space too. And so there's real generosity and mutuality in that. And it's kind of like what Art says in your film, right? That the best journalism is that which builds communities. And you've done that along the way. Jen, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, that's beautiful. I mean, it really shows that you're not centering your own. It's like, I have an impact plan. Let me go about that plan and execute that plan. It was generative as you went along. It wasn't like, it wasn't a statement. Very often, and a lot of us come from a design school. We might have too much of like of a top-down view of like, how do we get that change to happen? And we are learning to center these change practices to be not just in partnership with in a co-design process, but just giving over to where this kind of community engaged resonance and energy goes. So just really want to reflect. It's a beautiful example that you're sharing.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a film about local news, and so we
Yeah.
decided, let's make it meaningful locally wherever it screens, and that allowed us also that we brought in not just audience members, but reporters, editors to moderate our conversations or to be the focus of the after film Q&A. That allowed an opportunity for them to have that connection and build trust with their communities, and that felt really meaningful.
It's really exciting for me to hear that this framework worked. Jen and I have rejiggered our guidelines where we're really thinking about how reciprocity and just relations are really foundational to a good plan. And here, we have a successful model to prove that it's true, that it's working. So then why, yeah, so I guess back to the basics. Why is building trust important, especially in this moment in society? Why is building trust in such a key part of our secret sauce?
Survival. I mean, it's just survival. And that's really resonating for me right now. Just how dire things are for us here, as somebody who's grounded in the United States. Our democracy couldn't be more fractured, and it's, I think, has been, and so many of us have been seeing it for so long, coming into play in our, it's not just a national conversation, it's in our community and it's in our daily conversations with each other. I'm really hungry to do whatever I can to play some small role in mending how we relate to each other. And the way that our democracy is functioning, which is just, fraying in so many different ways. Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought it was really cool. Like, we all know, if you're on this call, you know it, our country is politically divided and we are polarized and we are journalistically divided. And there was something very manageable about this idea that local news, now not all local news is good, not all local news is credible, but that there was something very appealing that maybe this idea of credible local news can actually bring us together. Like, I think we can all root for our local women's basketball team, right? Like, there's an opportunity there to sort of bring us together through the sports pages or through the accomplishment of like a local entrepreneur. So, I think it was exciting it's been exciting to imagine that if we can hook people into like local news and a shared set of facts to work from for communities, that maybe it can inspire further civic engagement by audiences, so that they're not just readers of a newspaper or a news source, for example, but they are civically engaged. So it felt like it was like a innocuous way in, right? Like local news, there's nothing, it isn't so threatening. And I don't know, it just was an opportunity to remind people that there is a local square where we can come together in a way, and that can be perhaps a local newspaper, a local news source.
And I think it says a lot that, Art Cullen is a divisive figure. He has a lot of strong opinions. He has a strong editorial voice on the editorial page, but the Times is really respected. And you see that play out in the film. It's like, despite whatever political differences somebody might have with his opinions that he's writing about, on a news basis, it's a very trusted entity, and also it's a very accountable entity, which I think is similar across so many different local news outlets, is that, there's corrections, there's an editorial page, but it's a dialogue that I think Beth mentioned earlier. Just that, he is a very liberal voice, and yet it's still a public square for the community.
Yeah, no, totally. And so last week we were going through some stuff at the university, and Jen and I were talking, and somehow I picked up off the shelf this book that I've been intending to read called Bowling Alone by Robert Putnam. It's like 20 years old, but he was kind of talking about the decline of social capital in modern America and why it was really important to build these strong social connections. And you said just recently, Alice, in your comments, it's like survival. But I guess while we're thinking about social cohesion, survival, how do you think about social capital and networks? Like, how do we balance the me and the we while we're building these campaigns and everything we do?
I think one thing that I'm really passionate about is, I think the independent filmmaking community is at its core a very collaborative and we-minded set of people. And I think, bringing it back to entrepreneurship a little bit, a filmmaker is definitely an entrepreneur and has an entrepreneurial spirit. And one of the things that we're seeing that Beth touched on is, just the dearth of options there is for distribution for films that are diverse, that are, thinking, outside of that celebrity true crime emphasis. And, there's a lot of thinking going into how do you take back, the reins of distribution and kind of own your film and make really bold choices that are going to be right for you. And I find that really inspiring. And I think, connection is where it all starts. And Beth is a part of the Documentary Producers Alliance, which is an amazing community of people, and just that opportunity to talk to each other about, hey, this is what, I'm hearing from the folks that are holding the decision making about the distribution of my film. Why don't we talk to each other and see, how we might be able to turn the tables here and take back some of this ownership? Yeah.
Yeah, but I also think one thing that you did, and that was toward we and not me, Alice, is the opening question was always like what you said before too, was like, how can this film work for you? Like we didn't really have an agenda in the beginning. But then what was interesting is, so we would always say, how can this film work for you? And what was interesting is a lot of times they didn't know. And we would say, well, like, what we've done is we've done a screening, and we've invited like a local reporter or a local editor to moderate the Q&A, and like, could that give you visibility or an opportunity to speak to your own community? Or there were other papers that we started talking to, and then we were like, well, what if you screen the film and it could be a fundraiser and it raises awareness of local news? And so it was this really, like, we didn't foist anything down anyone's throats, but we really did try to like make an offering, and could this be valuable to you and your community, and how? And I'll say, like, it was often so surprising, the places where the film resonated, and that was really satisfying. Like, we were at like a festival example, we had been invited to screen at the Hamptons International Film Festival, and the Hamptons couldn't really be much more different on the surface from Storm Lake, Iowa. And then the Q&A was by someone with the festival, and I was there with the editor of the Hampton Star. But he said, I never expected this, but we're a company town too. Storm Lake is a company town because there's so many meat packing facilities in Storm Lake, Iowa, and slaughterhouses. But he said the company town in the Hamptons is real estate. It's a real estate driven place. And the editor described how he published an editorial that was critical of real estate kind of eating up all the free land and developing all the free land, and then how they lost all this advertising. And so here we were screening in the Hamptons, and it felt like maybe the movie would be received as if it were from Mars, and instead it was speaking to really local themes and local concerns. And then, similarly, we had a whole other conversation in Chicago, when we screened with a bunch of partners there, who they were actually journalists who were all representing underserved audiences. And so there was like like Arab language newspaper, and there was a Spanish language newspaper, and all these community newspapers. And so anyway, it was just, I think that we did really make a genuine effort. Like, and if the film doesn't work for you, then like, fine, don't join us. But, if it can work for you, we're happy to support you in however it can. So I think the success, if I want to use that word, I don't know if I want to use that word, but a special ingredient in the impact effort was trying to make it work, not just for us, but for other communities.
One thing that was cool that I think is related to this is and just was a kind of, I think, really unique, and I'm sure it's been done, and I would like to see other examples of how this rolled out. But during the, as Beth mentioned, the impact theatrical for the film, one of the ideas that she had was actually to, so many of the papers that we were collaborating with and working with, and this theatrical that was planned, it was very specifically focused on specific cities and also a tolerable road trip for the team. And so many of the papers and outlets they were working with were actually print, still print newspapers. And so this idea came about to actually take out an ad in the paper, because that was one of the things that we were hearing, is that, obviously ad sales and ad revenue is just like in the toilet. So it's this thing where, the film has a marketing budget, it has a budget to do ads. Okay, so maybe instead of like just throwing a bunch of money into Facebook, which we can't even go there, who knows what the return is on that these days, let alone 2 years ago, but actually taking out a physical ad that says this ad supports local news, and then had the information about the local screening that was happening. And it worked really well because the theatrical was selling out, which I think was due to a lot of different factors, but a lot of it, was that kind of creative thinking, but also the real specificity in saying, okay, we're not going to go to 25, 30 different cities and spread ourselves really thin. We're going to pick places where we know we have partners where they want this film, and that we can, really build something together.
I'm sure that resonated with you, Jen.
Yeah, that was amazing. I want to make sure before we open it up to questions so we don't lose it, that we practice Alice's good recommendations for excellent Zoom meetings and ask you both, like, what are your priorities? What are your needs? What could a community of people try to help you with?
Alice, you can go first.
Honestly, I'm seeing in the chat a lot of people share their projects and things that they're working on. And I would love more of that. And please find me online. We're at redowlpartners.com. I love getting emails with folks who are working on things that we might be able to collaborate on, even in some small way. So community would be my answer.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. I mean, I guess I would say, as an independent documentary filmmaker, if that's the identity I'm going to use for this call, because I have a couple of them, I guess I would say, yeah, that we have to kind of stick together and work together and share our skills and our creativity. It's a tough moment for independence. So I like community and I think supporting one another is really important right now in all kinds of ways.
Jen, my computer is really janky and I can't.
You want me to look? Yeah, I've been looking for a discrete, there's so much going on in the chat. And the only question we got so far is why so many women here? I don't know if we're going to answer that. But I want to invite.
Well, we definitely had a few great men involved in our project. So, I would definitely say that, but, yeah.
And I see some that are here today. So it's not just us. Okay, here we go. Wow. Here's a whole bunch of questions from,
one of our students.
Asavari, do you want to come to the video?
screen.
Justina, can you have folks join us now?
Yes, anyone can just turn on their camera. Maybe raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question on camera, or just drop it in the chat. You don't have to actually ask it. You can just type.
Asavari's question is pretty technical. I guess the first one is.
I see her. Do you want to ask?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, while listening
Tell
to your
us where you're from, what your interest is.
Oh sure. My name is Asabri. I mean, I've lived in New York now for 7 years. I'm from Delhi, originally from Delhi, in India. I moved to Westchester when I was 17 to go to Sarah Lawrence, and then I've joined the media management program. But as I was sort of listening to your conversation, I had a few questions as I'm also sort of navigating my graduating capstone. How can we sort of build local news around like positive events? Because what people want to write about or things that somehow tend to go viral in the current media cycle is scandal and, all this like bad news, or look at what this institution is doing. Like even in like a film like Storm Lake, if it's, talking about like similar crises such as like Flint, Michigan, or like something like Big Ag that's polluting waterways. Sorry, I just made that correlation. Um, so there's all this emphasis on bad news. How can we sort of tell stories that are also, I mean, I guess, yeah, like more positively oriented or not about a major crisis, but something that's happening that's really cool. So my project sort of focuses on trying to create small digital stories on participatory democracy in New York. So that's why I was asking. And then the second and third questions are about like financing and making the money back that you've put into your projects.
I don't know. Do you want to take the local news around positive events, Alice? Do you want me to take it? Because I'll definitely take the other. Well, take definitely the middle one.
I have a feeling Nada will have some good things to say about this too. The one thing that I'll share is one of our partners early on in the film campaign was Solutions Journalism Network, which is maybe not, it's solutions oriented, right? So it's about, good governance, about sharing instead of just, maybe just holding folks accountable, sharing solutions, creative ideas for, how we can address, systemic issues, city-based issues, what have you. So that was just something that popped to mind. But I overall just think it's a really good question that we should all talk about more.
Yeah, it's funny because I think a lot of local newspapers do want to focus on positive. Like they have like the, what's happening in the community, what new restaurant is opening, how the sports team is doing, what's happening on the honor roll. Like, so I feel like once you start really reading local newspapers, you start seeing that there is this emphasis on that and community building and identifying who's who and who's doing what. And unfortunately, and so I think a lot of newspapers, if they have the capacity, they really want to tell these positive stories because that is also what binds a community together. We did this great just while making the movie. We interviewed local readers, and it was really fun to see, like, to ask people what section of the newspaper they read first. And this guy, this farmer, like started crying about, like literally started to cry about, he reads the sports section. And then when he sees the kids in town, like he can't wait to give them a fist pump and, congratulate them on their achievement. And so, that's like definitely a newspaper question. But as we went around and read newspapers, if there was a place where there wasn't seeming interest in good news, it was in those local papers. It wasn't unusual.
I do want to plug your film and ask everyone to watch it. Again, it's called Storm Lake, because we're entering this election cycle, and it shows as a very beautiful sequence of community working together, all these different types of folks, immigrant workers, African-American farmers, all kinds of, just community from all ranks. And we really learn what caucusing is, and it's so much nicer than watching CNN. But I wanted to bring Daniela Velez to the floor. She has a question. Please join us.
Hello, everyone. I am based in Chicago. I am originally from Colombia, Bogota. Right now, I am pursuing my master's here at the Institute of Design. It is a dual degree program with public administration and design. And I have like two questions or two layers of my question for you all. For sure, I will see the movie. Thank you so much. I almost went to Parsons. And then, yeah, shifted, but I think I'm going to be there next year. So my question, the first part is, how do we approach a community without an extractive like approach? And the second question is, how might we use storytelling for shifting the mindset from a deficit mindset to an asset-based community development mindset to see like the assets that a community has? Thank you all.
Who wants to take that question? I know Jen just covered that in class on Monday.
Yeah, I think, extractive story. I feel like there's a whole syllabus here. And there's a big long reading list, and maybe I can share some of my favorite articles to share around after, actually, to everybody on the call. I think that it's a real interrogation as a filmmaker, and it's one of the things that I tried to figure out on any, project that I'm meeting, if there's an opportunity to work with somebody, what is the relationship between yourself and the participants in your film? I'm just thinking about it from a relational perspective. It says a lot to me if you have an ongoing, positive, productive relationship with the folks that are featured in your film. Of course, there's many different types of documentaries and many different types of storytelling, and that sometimes you're having, in a more journalistic capacity, more of an antagonistic relationship with somebody. It's very complicated. But I think at the end of the day, especially if you're working in, a more collaborative framework and a social issue, documentary mindset, or tradition, ideally the folks who are in the film and the folks who are, envisioning the film with you should be involved in the impact campaign as well. So that's just something that I look out for. And also, I do feel that folks who contribute in that way should be compensated for their time, and contributions to the project. But maybe I'll let Beth complicate my thoughts.
The animals are curious, so they're just coming. They're coming
Oh,
into.
cute.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Did we approve these panelists? I don't know.
No, I don't really have much to complicate. We're at this moment where there's a revisit of not just like how do we make like impact campaigns or distribution efforts less extractive, but how do we make the filmmaking process itself less extractive? And I guess I like with this particular project, I was always so pleased that like I don't think it's hagiographic, and at the same time, I think Art and the Cullens felt really seen, and the community felt represented, and I think it meant so much to them in this weird way that it was made that an Iowan had an important hand in it. I always love that Alice has family in Iowa, so it wasn't like she didn't have a connection to place. Our composer, people ask, how did you get Andrew Bird to be the composer for your movie? And we had been using his score as what we call temp, as like temporary score throughout the making of the film. And then and we kept on interviewing composers because we're like, well, we'll never get Andrew Bird. And then it turns out that I sent Andrew Bird the rough cut, and his grandfather has a farm. Had a farm. I don't know if his grandfather's still alive, but there's a family farm in Iowa. And he was like, you're showing a side of Iowa that most people don't see, and I really want to support it. I'm going to be your composer. So anyway, there were real efforts of, even this sounds really silly, like when you make an independent documentary film, it's not unusual to have something called a fiscal sponsor. So it allows you to take grants and tax deductible donations because you have this 501c3 umbrella organization. And so we chose to have our fiscal sponsor in Iowa so that money would go back into Iowa and not just support the, metropolitan New York filmmaking scene, but the Iowan one. And in fact, the fiscal sponsor is called Film Scene in Iowa. So anyway, I think you're asking a super important question. I think the many parts of the industry, not all, are really asking that question. How can we be more inclusive and show care in our process? So is that the case in true crime docs? I don't really think so, but anyway, I don't know. I don't make those.
All of these choices add up, and we can, little by little work towards this more just and reciprocal and caring culture, which is probably why there's so many women on this call. So I'm just wondering, do we have more questions? Jen, do you want to close us out with a question, or let Beth and Alice reflect?
I see one from Joanne.
Okay,
that was a beautiful moment to end. But Joanne, please.
But Joanne, let's go. I don't see the question. Go ahead.
You're muted. You're muted.
You are muted now.
Oh, press it one more time because we heard you for a second. So it's not like the red icon. Now we can hear you. Perfect.
Okay, very good. Joanne Safine, I am a president of Bionic Crayon. We are a branding and marketing agency here in New York City. And this is all wonderful process about documentary filmmaking, which includes production and includes the challenges and the problems that you're undergoing. All very interesting. And the question was asked about how do we tell the positive side? How do we get that out there? Well, that's a wonderful question, but let's consider something. We have a tremendous glut of information out there. We have a tremendous amount of clutter. You got to cut through that clutter. You want to get that story out there. You want that positive input out there. Then what you're going to do is you're going to take that challenge or that dilemma and you're going to tell that story, but you always want to do so with a compelling character, a strong character. Define your character very clearly and define the circumstance that they are faced with, the situation, because this is each and every one of us every day. Everybody's got a lot of stuff on their plate, everybody. And I don't care how well positioned you are in the culture, you got your share. You really do. We all do. And we all are just, involved to the nines with our problems. But when we're looking at something, we want to be engaged and it has to be compelling for us. So we need characters that are well-defined and characters that are going to just engage us and make us want to watch them and see what exactly are they going to do, how are they going to handle this so-called dilemma that they've got, how are they going to navigate, how are they going to size up not only the situation and the circumstance, but the characters involved. What is it that they want? And how are they going to go about getting what they want? And that's the storytelling, isn't it? But if you want that positive outcome, then you have to show how you arrive at the positive outcome. For instance, if you're talking about, very simply put, somebody said something like, oh, a good story is a restaurant opening up. Well, yeah, that's if it's a good restaurant and it's well positioned and they're serving food that people want to eat, then you're going to have to not only play up the branding aspect and all the lovely parts of it, but show how it solved the problem in the community that maybe people didn't have that kind of food before. Maybe they didn't have a wonderful place where they could go and they could.
Joanne. Did you have a question? We want to hear it.
Oh, you know what my question is, I was not so much asking the question as I was answering the question, and I'm sorry if this is confusing to anyone, but the question that I want to just answer is, if you want to you want a positive effect, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to come to a positive outcome, but you have to show a problem that gets you to that positive effect. Otherwise, if it's just a positive effect, then maybe, it's kind of like not as engaging as it ought to be. And with that, I will just say thank you. That's it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So we have Chanda and then we have Yun up next. So Chanda, can you come
and then I think we're gonna let our guests go.
Two more questions and we'll wrap it up. Chanda?
Let's try that again. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for taking my question. I have lived an extraordinary life, and many times people tell me that you need to write a book, you need to tell people, you should have a movie of your life and all of this. As I'm heading to some new territory that, again, is extraordinary. And I'll just say God's hand is on my life. And I know that now I'm able to say that publicly. God's hand is on my life. He's real. He's real. I've lived miracles. How would I, or someone who has lived a life like mine, go about finding someone that they could trust to tell their story, and how to find storytellers? I have to say that the fact that I'm even on this Zoom tells me that I'm being pushed towards telling my story, and it's encouraging to see so many women storytellers on here. So that's my question.
I'm just going to respond to how I respond to my students when my students say, how do I find a production company that I want to work with? And I would say, well, watch a lot. And whose work do you admire? Whose work resonates with you? Whose work aligns with your worldview? And do you get a good sense of? And if you really want to have your story adapted in some way, then it takes lots and lots and lots of conversations. And do other people think your story is really that interesting? And is there a story to tell? And how are you going to tell it? So anyway, I would just encourage you to pay attention to films or podcasts or pieces of media that you really respond to, and reach out to the people behind them. Every maker has their own voice, and so whose resonates with you. I guess kind of that's where I would in a format like this talk about.
Yeah, that's a great
answer. That's how I would answer that.
That's so wise. That's a very wise and smart answer, Beth. Thank you so much. And also, China, I'd say that there's so many modalities too. I mean, there are just so many modalities. So just make sure you keep your journals and write your treatment, and we just never know. I mean, honestly. And so we were going to hear from Yuan Huang next. Yoon, are you still there? Is it Yoon Huang? How do I pronounce your name?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much. Thank you very much all for your time today. I think the work that all of you do is actually truly incredible. Whether it's, Beth with your documentaries, or, Alice, or, Professor, and investing in startups for social impact. It really means a lot to our community. Yeah, and this is really simple. I'm also very much interested in these things that you're doing. Thankfully, I was able to dive my foot into these fields a little bit last summer, and I was wondering, is there a way to just contact you, like via email or whatnot, if you have any further questions?
Yes, I dropped my email in the chat, and I see that Beth just did that as well.
So
thank you very much.
Thank you. Jen, do you want to close us out with any reflections and then say thank you?
Yeah. So yeah, amazing again. Thank you so much for your incredible generosity, sharing your contact details, encouragement for folks to contact you. I'm glad that this event has attracted so many folks, both inside and outside of the New School community. And we just really appreciate you representing what Nita and I try to encourage in the classroom every day. And then we see our students graduate and fulfill in the world. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you want to share any closing pearls of wisdom, we'll take it. And if not, we'll bid everyone farewell and good night.
I would just say thank you so much for having us and having this conversation. I would say working with Alice and getting this film out into the world, and you too, Nita, has been one of the most rewarding chapters in my professional career. So, it's been such a learning experience for me. So just thanks for showing interest in it and for having us. Yeah.
It's a beautiful film, and I think we all have to watch it. I want everyone to watch it on this call. Alice?
Yeah, and then go to stormlakemovie.com, where you can find many ways to support local news in your community. This was so fun. Thank you. And I love reading everybody, what everybody's up to and what they're doing. Keep at it.
Well, thank you to everyone who came. Thank you, Jen, Beth, and Allison. Woo! Thank you, Justina. Thank you to all of the attendees. We'll circle back, Justina, and we're available to answer any questions you may have. So wishing everyone a good night. Thank you for wanting to explore trust building and storytelling and community building. We will make a better world together.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. See you soon.
Bye.
Good night.
Like that.